Level 1. The Recruit. An 8-year-old boy lives peacefully in his village before Ottoman soldiers arrive. Ottoman soldiers enter the village to collect boys through the Devshirme system. The soldiers pull the boy away from his mother's arms. The devastated mother desperately reaches for her son as he is taken away. The narration explains the Devshirme system. The selection process reveals that one boy out of every 40 is chosen. The young boy realizes he is the one selected. The boy does not understand Turkish because it is a foreign language to him. The narration explains that he will eventually learn Turkish. The selected boys begin a long, forced march toward Edirne. A rope connects the boys together as they walk under guard. The boys cry continuously during the beginning of the journey. By the second day, exhaustion replaces their tears with silence. The group continues marching without resistance. The boy arrives in Edirne. Officials erase his old identity by giving him a new name. His original name is never spoken again.
The boy enters a massive barracks filled with around 200 other boys. He experiences his new life among hundreds of recruits. Within the first week, he is converted to Islam. The instructors explain that his former family no longer has any claim over him. The boy is told that both he and his family now belong to the Ottoman state. The emotional loss of his previous life begins to settle in. Each night, the young boy cries for his mother. The crying continues through 40 consecutive nights. The 41st night arrives. For the first time, the boy no longer cries. The narration emphasizes that this is the last time he will cry for many years. The boy is officially enrolled as an Acemi Olan cadet. The instructors explain that he will not be allowed to carry a weapon for 8 years. His first duties involve carrying water. The boy spends long days transporting water as part of his training. His responsibilities later expand to carrying heavy loads of wood. He performs exhausting labor as part of his discipline. During his second winter, plague spreads through the barracks. The disease claims the lives of many cadets. The boy is ordered to carry the bodies of those who died. The harsh reality of military life replaces childhood completely. Far away in a Balkan village, his mother continues living without him. She lights a candle in hope that her missing son is still alive. She has no way of knowing she will never see him again.
The boy remains completely unaware of his mother's continued hope. The narration explains that one day he will understand what she endured. The story returns to the 8-year-old recruit. The narration concludes that although he is only 8 years old, the cycle that will define his entire life has already begun.
The boy has grown into a 16-year-old recruit. He stands with fellow recruits to take the official Janissary oath. The oath marks his transition into active military service. He has issued his first musket. He receives the sacred military kettle, known as the Kazan. He is assigned to his new family, his Orta, a company of approximately 200 Janissaries. The soldiers of the Orta gather around the same cooking pot, symbolizing their brotherhood. The narration explains that the Kazan is considered sacred. The soldiers are taught that protecting the kettle is more important than protecting their rifles. The narration explains that losing the Kazan in battle means the entire Orta has failed. The young Janissary prepares for his first military campaign. The army begins marching toward the Balkan frontier. Thousands of soldiers travel together on foot. The march continues day after day across difficult terrain. The narration states that they cover roughly 30 kilometers every day. After weeks of marching, exhaustion becomes part of daily life. Before experiencing combat, tragedy strikes the company. One of his comrades dies during the campaign. The soldiers bury their fallen companion in an unmarked field. The young Janissary silently witnesses his first military funeral.
The narration emphasizes that he has not yet fired a single shot in battle. The campaign eventually reaches a garrison town near the Danube. The young Janissary notices Elif, the daughter of a local baker. Their eyes meet for the first time. A quiet bond begins to form between them.
The ordinary Janissaries are forbidden from marrying. Despite the rule, the two secretly continue seeing each other. They meet discreetly whenever circumstances allow. The meetings occur only twice each year. 3 years pass with their secret relationship continuing. The army receives orders for another campaign. The Janissaries approach a river crossing before sunrise. The first major battle begins at dawn. Enemy cannons open fire on the advancing soldiers. Explosions tear through the ranks of his Orda.
40 men from his company are killed before reaching the opposite bank. The surviving soldiers continue pushing across the river. The young Janissary survives the deadly crossing. The narration explains that survival happened instinctively rather than through conscious choice. His hands continue loading and firing automatically amid the chaos. The battle ends with him still alive.
In a quiet moment afterward, memories of childhood return. He remembers the frightened 8-year-old boy tied to the rope of recruits. He recalls crying for his mother during those first nights away from home. He realizes that child no longer exists within him. The narration reflects that he is no longer sure whether he misses the boy he once was. The campaign continues toward another war. The sacred Kazan is lifted once again for the march. The Janissary carries the heavy kettle as a symbol of his duty. The narration concludes that someone must always carry the kettle forward into the next war.
The Janissary is now 23 years old. He has earned promotion and now commands 10 soldiers. He observes the young men under his command. The narration explains that 9 of them are younger than he was when he was taken from his village. He begins training the new recruits. Their training follows the same harsh discipline he once endured. He demands endurance, obedience, and precision from every soldier. He rarely raises his voice while giving orders. His calm authority is enough to command respect. The narration explains that silence carries more power than shouting in the Janissary army. The recruits quickly learn to obey without hesitation. Away from the military camp, Elif is expecting a child. The Janissary receives permission to take leave. He is granted 6 days away from military service. The narration explains that it is the longest leave of his career. He returns home to be with Elif. Their daughter is born. The new father chooses a name for his daughter before duty calls him back. He prepares to leave his family once again. The farewell between him and Elif is brief but emotional. The narration explains that he will see his daughter only twice before her 5th birthday. Time passes as military campaigns continue. The army begins another siege at a fortress along the Danube. The siege stretches over several exhausting days. Continuous fighting wears down the defenders and attackers alike. By the 9th day, 12 soldiers from his unit have been killed. The commander quietly records the names of each fallen comrade. He writes the names on a small scrap of paper. He folds the paper carefully. He places the paper inside his boot for safekeeping. The narration explains that he cannot fully explain why he keeps the names with him. The list of fallen comrades remains hidden in his boot as the campaign continues. Years of warfare begin leaving permanent marks on his body. He notices that one shoulder no longer lifts properly. Simple movements become increasingly painful. A persistent cough develops from years of breathing siege gun smoke. The cough never completely disappears. The physical cost of military service becomes impossible to ignore. Night falls over the military camp. Unable to sleep, old memories return. He hears the imagined sound of the rope linking frightened boys together on the road to Edirne. The memory feels as vivid as it did 15 years earlier.
The narration explains that some sounds never fade with time. Morning arrives and military life resumes. The Janissary reflects on his years of service. He realizes another promotion is within reach. He quietly senses the next rank drawing closer. The anticipation reminds him of the quiet fear he felt during his first winter as a recruit. The narration concludes that the feeling remains constant, silent, persistent, and always present.
The Janissary reaches the age of 28. He receives a major promotion within the Janissary ranks. His new position gives him genuine authority over military affairs. He becomes responsible for enforcing discipline among his soldiers. He supervises the distribution of wages to the men under his command. He is entrusted with maintaining order throughout the military camp. Approximately 200 Janissaries now serve under his authority. Senior officers begin listening carefully whenever he speaks. His experience earns him the respect of both soldiers and commanders. Far from the battlefield, his daughter is now 4 years old. She spends most of her childhood without her father. The local baker's apprentice regularly looks after her. The little girl affectionately calls the apprentice uncle. The Janissary learns about this during one of his visits home. He quietly realizes another man has been present for moments he has missed. The emotional pain affects him more deeply than any wound from battle.
The narration explains that this loss hurts more than any battlefield ever has. Military duty calls him back to the army. News spreads that a neighboring Orda is close to mutiny. The unrest is caused by unpaid wages. The commanders assign him to resolve the crisis. He enters the camp where hundreds of angry Janissaries have gathered. The soldiers demand the wages they are owed. Tension rises as the possibility of violence grows. Rather than threaten the men, he chooses to speak calmly. He carefully negotiates with the leaders of the dissatisfied Orda. His measured words begin to ease the tension.
The angry soldiers gradually lower their resistance. 300 Janissaries agree to stand down. The crisis ends without bloodshed. The narration emphasizes that he never needed to raise his voice. Another military campaign begins during the harsh winter in Anatolia. Snow and freezing temperatures surround the army camp. The soldiers settle into their tents for the night. The commander completes his nightly inspection. He checks each tent only once before retiring. The freezing night grows even colder. Morning arrives. 8 soldiers under his command are found frozen to death in their sleep.
The commander silently witnesses the tragedy. He realizes he should have inspected the tents a second time. The weight of responsibility settles heavily upon him. The narration explains that he carries this guilt with him. While he remains posted far from home, Elif falls seriously ill with a fever. News of her illness finally reaches him. He immediately begins the journey home. The distance prevents him from arriving in time. Elif survives the illness. Her recovery happens without him by her side. He realizes he was absent during one of the most important moments of her life. The emotional distance between duty and family grows even greater. Later, in a quiet moment, childhood memories return once again. He remembers the frightened boy who could not stop crying on the road to Edirne. He reflects on how much that child has changed. The narration wonders whether the frightened boy would recognize the man he has become.
The commander stands alone, carrying the responsibilities of leadership. He realizes that command is no longer something granted by rank alone. The narration concludes that command has become a burden he must carry by himself.
The Janissary reaches the age of 33. He receives another promotion within the Janissary Corps. He is entrusted with carrying the Orta's battle flag. The sacred standard is presented to him before the campaign. The narration explains that the flag bearer occupies the most dangerous position in the formation. Enemy soldiers are trained to target the standard first. He marches into battle carrying the flag at the front of his company. Every movement is made while protecting the standard. Far from the battlefield, his daughter has reached the age of 9. She has never seen her father during a military campaign. Her memories of him come mostly through letters. She waits for his rare visits home. He returns only twice each year. Each visit reveals him looking thinner and more worn by war. His daughter quietly notices the changes in him. Another campaign leads to a border skirmish. The opposing cavalry launches a sudden charge. Enemy horsemen race directly toward the Janissary formation. The attack focuses on capturing the battle flag. A cavalryman swings a saber toward the flag bearer. The blade strikes his forearm. The saber cuts through his arm to the bone. Blood pours from the deep wound. Despite the injury, he refuses to release the standard. He continues holding the flag upright. Fellow Janissaries rush forward to defend the standard. Several soldiers are killed while protecting both him and the flag. The battle standard never touches the ground. The fighting eventually subsides. His wounded arm receives treatment. A permanent scar remains across his forearm. The wound never completely heals. The narration explains that cold weather will cause the scar to ache for the rest of his life. During the same battle, the commanding Aga is killed. The leadership of the Orta suddenly collapses. He becomes the highest-ranking surviving officer. He immediately assumes command of the company. Orders are issued while blood continues soaking through his sleeve. The wounded commander directs the defense. The soldiers continue fighting under his leadership. 6 exhausting hours pass without reinforcements. Throughout those hours, he effectively commands 200 men. He maintains discipline despite his severe injury. Reinforcements finally arrive. The immediate crisis comes to an end. After the battle, he reflects on his journey. He remembers the frightened 8-year-old tied to the rope of recruits. He realizes that child could never have imagined carrying a battle flag. The narration explains that neither could the man he once was. He quietly accepts how completely his life has changed. His actions during the battle draw the attention of higher command.
Senior officers begin discussing his future. The narration reveals that another promotion is approaching. Whether prepared or not, a new rank is waiting for him.
The Janissary reaches the age of 38. He is promoted to command the entire Orta. 200 Janissaries now serve under his leadership. He becomes responsible for distributing their pay. He enforces discipline throughout the company. The lives of every soldier under his command become his responsibility. The narration emphasizes that he must also answer for every death within his Orta. Far from the battlefield, his daughter has reached the age of 14. A marriage is arranged between her and the son of a merchant. News of the engagement reaches him through a letter. His opinion is requested despite the great distance. He carefully writes his approval in a reply. The letter is sent back to his family.
Preparations for the engagement ceremony begin. The commander remains unable to return home. A military campaign keeps him far away. His army is engaged in a siege in the eastern frontier. The narration explains that he is approximately 900 kilometers from home. His daughter's ceremony takes place without him. The commander continues fulfilling his duties at the siege. The siege stretches into a prolonged campaign. Days turn into weeks. The siege reaches 71 days in duration. Conditions inside the military camp steadily worsen. Disease spreads among the soldiers. Dysentery begins claiming lives throughout the Orda. One soldier after another dies from illness. The enemy causes fewer casualties than the disease. 34 of his men die from dysentery before the fortress walls fall. The commander records the names of the deceased. He begins writing letters to their families. Each letter is written by his own hand.
He completes 34 separate letters. The narration explains that he has never met any of the families receiving them. The emotional burden grows heavier with every letter written. Another letter arrives from home. The letter describes how Elif's hair has turned gray. He imagines the years that have passed without seeing her. The narration explains that he will not see her with his own eyes for another year. The siege continues despite the losses. During the fighting, he is struck by a musket ball. The bullet passes through his hip. He survives the wound. Medical treatment keeps him alive, but cannot fully repair the injury. The wound heals imperfectly. He begins walking with a noticeable limp. The narration explains that he will favor one side for the rest of his life. Years of service prompt quiet reflection. He remembers the first 10 recruits he once trained. He recalls teaching them with the same discipline he had experienced as a cadet. He watches those former recruits leading soldiers of their own. Each former trainee now commands his own group of 10 men. The commander realizes that tradition has continued through another generation. The narration reflects that the chain of mentorship stretches backward farther than he can imagine. His thoughts turn toward the highest levels of leadership. He looks toward the Aga's tent. The tent symbolizes the highest command within the Janissary Corps. He realizes his years of service have brought him within reach of that position. The narration concludes that he has finally earned the right to imagine himself standing inside the Aga's tent.
The Janissary reaches the age of 45. He is promoted to become second only to the awe of the entire Janissary Corps. His authority now extends across thousands of Janissaries. Important military decisions pass through him before reaching the ranks. The narration explains that countless soldiers are affected by the choices he helps make. Far from the army, his daughter has reached the age of 21. She is now married. She has become a mother herself. News reaches him that he has a grandson. After returning from campaign, he is finally able to meet the child. The meeting takes place in a military garrison courtyard. He arrives wearing his Janissary uniform. The smell of gunpowder still lingers on his clothing. The narration explains that he left the battlefield only 3 days earlier. He gently holds his grandson for the first time.
The emotional moment contrasts with the life of constant warfare. A political crisis begins in the Ottoman capital.
A decision made by the Sultan angers the Janissary Corps. Discontent spreads rapidly through the barracks. Thousands of soldiers begin discussing open revolt. He is placed between the leadership and the angry corps. The narration explains that one wrong statement could ignite rebellion. Nearly 10,000 Janissaries are prepared to march on the palace. He gathers with senior officers and representatives of the corps. Instead of issuing threats, he carefully begins to negotiate. Hour after hour, he continues speaking with patience. For 6 continuous hours, he chooses every word with precision. The anger among the soldiers slowly begins to fade. The possibility of open revolt gradually disappears. The crisis ends without the army marching against the palace. His ability to lead through restraint earns even greater respect. Another message arrives from home. Elif's health has permanently declined. Age has left her physically weakened.
His superiors unexpectedly grant him leave. The narration explains that he never requested the leave. He returns home to be with Elif. He sits beside her bed. The quiet stillness feels unfamiliar after decades of military life. He realizes he no longer knows how to simply sit in one place. Years of constant movement have become part of him. He reflects on the condition of his body. His injured shoulder reminds him of earlier campaigns. The scar across his forearm remains visible. His wounded hip still affects the way he walks. The persistent cough continues without relief. The narration explains that every injury represents a different stage of his career. Each wound serves as a receipt for years of service. Later, alone with his thoughts, he remembers the frightened child taken from his village. He imagines the 8-year-old boy walking along the road to Edirne. The child now feels like a complete stranger, yet he realizes that the boy is also the only person who truly understands the full cost of this life. He quietly accepts everything that has been sacrificed. His journey has brought him to the threshold of the final promotion. Only one rank remains above him. The narration concludes that the highest rank in the Janissary army is also the loneliest. The Janissary reaches the age of 52. He is appointed commander of the entire Janissary Corps. The highest military authority of the Janissaries is placed in his hands. Every new recruit entering the Corps ultimately falls under his command. The narration recalls that he was once one of those frightened recruits himself. He watches another generation of boys arrive through the Devshirme system. Their journey mirrors the one he began decades earlier. The commander understands the path each recruit will face. He enters the Sultan's court for matters of state. He stands before the Sultan during discussions of war and peace. Senior officials gather around the Imperial Council. His military advice carries enormous influence. The narration explains that his word can move 30,000 Janissaries. The burden of command now extends across the entire empire. During his first spring as commander, tragedy strikes his family. Elif passes away. News of her death reaches every corner of his world. Military authorities organize her funeral. She is buried with full military honors. The commander never wanted such a ceremony. He understands that refusing it is impossible. Rows of soldiers attend the funeral in perfect formation. Military drums and ceremonial honors fill the air. The barracks remain crowded with soldiers paying their respects. After the ceremony, he returns home. The house feels completely silent. The narration reflects that it is the first time in 44 years that Elif is no longer there. He quietly sits, alone with his grief. Duty calls him back, despite his personal loss. A rebellion erupts in a distant province. The commander prepares a response. He selects experienced officers to lead the campaign. Among them are men he personally trained decades earlier. Those former recruits are now old commanders themselves. The army marches to suppress the rebellion. The campaign proves costly. Some of the veteran officers never return. The commander receives confirmation of their deaths. Once again, he begins writing letters to their families. He writes every letter by hand. The narration emphasizes that even at the highest rank, he still performs this duty himself.
Time continues to move forward. His daughter visits him twice each year. She brings her children to see their grandfather. The family gathers during the brief visits. The commander cherishes every moment with his grandchildren. The narration reminds him that these visits happen only twice a year. He remembers meeting Alif only twice each year when they were young. Those secret meetings had taken place because ordinary Janissaries were forbidden to marry.
The contrast between youth and old age settles heavily upon him. Alone again, his thoughts return to the road leading to Edirne. He remembers the frightened 8-year-old walking among the other boys. The child appears vividly in his memory. The narration reflects that the entire course of his life had already begun with that first journey. The commander realizes the boy unknowingly carried every future joy and sacrifice within him from the very first mile. He reflects on the extraordinary distance between that child and the man he has become. The years of service are drawing to a close. He senses that one final duty remains before his military career ends. The narration concludes that there is one last task left to complete before his service comes to an end.
The former commander reaches the age of 60. He has stepped down from active military command. He now serves as a senior advisor to the Janissary Corps. He also advises the Ottoman palace on military matters. Most of his days are now spent in the training courtyard. Groups of new Akimi Olans gather around him. The young recruits look at him with the same admiration and uncertainty he once felt toward his own instructors. He begins teaching the new generation. The recruits expect stories of glory and victory. Instead, he speaks about the sacred kazan, the kettle shared by every orta. He tells them about the rope that bound frightened boys together on the road to Edirne. He describes the bitter cold of endless campaigns. He remembers the 34 letters he once wrote to families of fallen soldiers. He tells the story of the battle flag that could never be allowed to fall. The recruits listen without interrupting. Fear and respect keep every boy completely silent. Their expressions remind him of his own childhood. Years continue to pass. His grandson reaches the age of 16. The young man chooses to enlist in the Janissary Corps. The grandfather never asked him to join. He also never tried to stop him. The enlistment ceremony begins. His grandson stands among the new recruits. The young recruit takes the same oath that his grandfather once took. The narration explains that 44 years have passed since that earlier oath. The elderly commander quietly watches the ceremony. For a brief moment, memories overwhelm him. The frightened 8-year-old boy and the 60-year-old veteran seem to exist within him at the same time. Past and present merge into a single reflection. The years of service have taken a heavy physical toll. His body bears the marks of a lifetime in uniform. Despite physical weakness, his memory remains remarkably clear. He still remembers every name from every condolence letter he ever wrote. The names remain perfectly ordered in his mind. Another evening settles over the barracks. He spends what will be his final night there. A newly arrived recruit approaches him. The boy has only recently been taken from his village. Fear is visible on the child's face. The recruit quietly asks whether military life ever becomes easier.
The old commander looks at the frightened boy. He recognizes the same fear he once carried himself. He decides to answer honestly. He tells the boy that it never becomes easier. He explains that the burden is simply carried. The boy silently absorbs the answer. Morning arrives. The elderly commander walks outside the barracks. A new cart of Devshirme boys arrives at the barracks gate. The boys are tied together with rope around their wrists. Many of them are crying. The youngest appears no older than 8 years old. The commander quietly watches the children. The narration reflects that one of these boys will someday carry the battle flag. Another will one day command 30,000 Janissaries. Another will eventually comfort a frightened recruit with the same words. The boys remain completely unaware of the lives awaiting them. They take their first uncertain steps into the barracks. The elderly commander continues watching in silence. The memories of his own arrival return one final time. The new generation disappears through the barracks gate. The narration reflects that none of the boys yet understand the journey before them. The story comes full circle as another generation begins the same path. The narration concludes that the cycle continues.